I say this a lot for indie authors, like their audiobook quality should be just as good as if they had gotten it done through a big production company. It doesn't matter if you're hiring somebody off ACX or if you're going through Podium or if you're going through Penguin Random House. Like, your audiobook should sound beautiful, and there's no reason that it shouldn't.
You're listening to Writer Unblocked, a podcast for aspiring and experienced authors. I'm your host and author coach, Nicole, and on this show, we chat with up-and-coming as well as best-selling authors, literary agents, and publishing professionals to inspire you and keep the vibe high. Today on Writer Unblocked, I'm chatting with audiobook narrator Samantha Norbury. Samantha shares her journey from theater to audiobook narration, the importance of quality production for indie authors, and the impact of AI voices on the industry. We also talk about the emotional connection of this craft, the use of pseudonyms, and the growing accessibility of stories through audiobooks. As always, additional information is available in the show notes, including how to work with me to expand your author career to the next level. Head on to reignitewithnicole.com to learn more. Okay, let's dive in. Thank you, Samantha, for joining me on UK time at 3 o'clock Eastern on this wonderful day. And I'm really excited to talk to you because I am an audiobooks advocate. So having a narrator on the show is a dream. So welcome.
Yay, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Okay, so tell for the listener just a little intro, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Samantha Norbury. I also go by Dahlia Summers, is my pseudonym for romance titles. I am an audiobook narrator for almost 3 years. I have a background in theater and acting. I've been doing it my whole life since I was about 4. And then I took a really big gap when I became a mom, which is when I fell madly in love with audiobooks because I no longer had time to read. So
that was the entry point, motherhood.
Yes, motherhood. Yes, suddenly zero time to just sit down and enjoy a story. So instead, I got to listen to stories, and I fell deeply in love with audiobooks. And it didn't take long before I realized that they were actors who were performing these books. And I was just like, oh, maybe I could do that, because acting and books are my 2 favorite things. So that's I just started researching it for years before I took the plunge.
You have a theater background. That's why. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And the leap from theater to voice acting is not as big of a jump as I think people might think, because when you come from film or TV, those actors rely a lot on their facial expressions.
Yes.
It's the very subtle nuances. But theater actors, they go big because you can't really see their facial expressions. So we're always doing these really big things. And I think that translates to voice acting pretty well. So yeah, the leap wasn't too different. The biggest difference between theater and voice is that you're just so many different characters all in one. But otherwise, it's not a huge change, really.
That tracks. That makes perfect sense. I'm wondering more about the prep work that goes into narrating a book, right? Because you get a manuscript tomorrow, you want to take on the project. What is your prep work process?
Yeah,
no, wait, let me go back because I think I'm getting the chronology wrong. First and foremost, an author reaches out to you. Let's take it to an author reaches out to you and says, I want to work with you, narrate my book. What's the first thing? What's the intake like? What do you ask? What type of book? What's that process?
I don't usually, when an author reaches out to me, typically it's somebody I know because we're usually mutuals on socials. So I usually know what sort of style books they do. I will ask if there's certain triggers that I'm not comfortable with narrating, but I like narrating all genres. I do have favorites, but I narrate pretty much anything. So I've never gotten a request and been like, nope, I'm not doing that, unless it has specific triggers that I'm just not comfortable with. So I do ask about those up front. And then, yeah, we start talking and I let them know my rates, my availability. Sometimes my schedule might be too full and they want it done sooner and I just can't. Or the pricing doesn't work out, which is usually the case. Not always, but
Oh,
more
we will
often
talk
than not.
about
Yeah.
yes, we'll talk about, educating the audience on audiobook costs and why you need to invest
Yes.
in quality. Okay,
Yes.
but let's say okay, so let's you have a deal and you get the manuscript and so what is, some people sometimes don't understand like the prep work that goes into like when you say I'm prepping a manuscript for audio, like what does that entail?
Yeah, so if it's with an indie author, I send them the first thing I do is I send them a welcome packet, which is like it's thick. It is a thick welcome packet. And
Nice.
in it is so many questions, mostly about the characters. I ask everything from the obvious things like how old are they, what accents do they have, give me 3 adjectives that describe them. I ask about their education level. I ask, like all the things that really help create an entire person in my head. If they have character art, I will put that up in my booth. If they have like a mood board, I'll ask for a link to that. If they have YouTube clips of actors that they think fit their character, I will ask for that so that anything that's in their head gets in my head. So
I
that is
love
sort
that.
of
That
like
is
step 1.
well, first of all, I'm a Pinterest gal, so yes, yes, yes. But I love that if there's art, you put it in the booth while you're narrating.
I do. I love it. I mean, I love character art. I have some up in my booth from an old book that I just don't want to take down because it's so pretty. But it's good because then I can look at them and it's just one more thing that helps get me in the headspace. So yeah, I'll have them fill that out and then I'll read the book. And then if I have time, I'll read the book twice. If I don't have time, which sometimes I don't, I'll just prep as I read. So I annotate it. I highlight all the character dialogue and everyone gets their own little color. And I'll highlight in yellow if it's like a way they say it so that as I'm recording, I can easily visualize where, like if he growled something or she sighed something, like I'll know when I'm doing it that it has to be said that way. So I don't have to stop and punch back in and blah, blah, blah.
So it's a very
Um,
visually organized.
Yes,
pro-
I'm really organized, and because I do a lot of fantasy, I have, like, full-on spreadsheets of, like the book I'm doing right now is a high fantasy series, and I have, a spreadsheet that's, like, their character names, how to pronounce it because 'cause they're all, like, Irish, and a lot of them are made up, and then I've got, like, what race they're in, like, are they humans or fae and then, their characteristics and, like, what just so much stuff, so I've got, like, all these spreadsheets.
I
So I'm really
love that.
organized, but it makes the recording faster, and it makes it easier for my editor, which is important.
I love that so much because when I work with authors on their writing, I'm always like advocating for the art. Like, listen, you have to write with audio in mind. And I ask for things like, give me your character, why am I blanking on the word? Your character bio, so to speak, or like a one sheet and give me what is the magic system here. They're like, oh, but that's not going in the book. And I'm like, no, 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 it's not for the book. It's for all the other people that are going to have to interact with the making of either a derivative of your book or when you're hiring someone else who needs to understand your book or even for your cover art designer, you want to flesh out those things that are not necessarily because they're going to end up in the book, but to give other people an understanding of what's going on in your head as an author.
Yes, it's a whole world, isn't it?
Oh, fantasy. I mean, don't get me, yeah, the names, the places, how to pronounce them, all of that. It's massive, right? It's very massive. And sometimes I need those. I appreciate when an author does include either like a map or a family tree because sometimes I really
Pronunciation guides, please.
pronunciation guides. Yes, I'm reading one that's heavy Irish like influence, right? And I said, oh, God, I need a and she did. She included a guide, thank God, in the back of the book. And I'm like, okay, now I can sort of pronounce some of this stuff. But that's so prep work, super organized, super visual. In the prep process, I'm curious because I've never asked a narrator this. Since you're reading once, maybe twice, the material, do you ever go back to the author and say, hey, it would be better if we change this line? Because sometimes they don't write for audio in mind. And so it sounds funny in the narration.
I don't because I always just feel like that's not my place. You know what I mean? Like, my job is just to speak the words and perform the words and, like, not change the words. So I don't purposefully. There will be times when I will get my pickup packet back, and they'll be like, you flipped these, but I've had authors be like, but I like it better that way. And I was like, I didn't even mean to. It just happened. Like, I didn't mean to. It just I flipped it in my head and I changed it on accident, but I'm glad you like it and we can keep it if you want. But
You probably do it subconsciously because it's better for the audio.
it's like, I didn't know. But even like the book I'm doing right now, there's like it's a perfect example of that because she calls this like race of fae, they're called the Ishi, and the way it's spelled is like AOSSI, but then they call themselves the she, but it's spelled SIDHE. So like visually they look really different, but when I say it, it's like she's like, we always call them the Ishi, but it turns out they're called the she. And like it doesn't sound as dramatic because they sound so similar, but in the
But they're
book they
written.
look really different. So it makes a lot of sense. I'm like, oh well, it just is what it is in audio. Like there's not much we can do.
And for those who are listening who are not familiar with the book process, pickups, right? So explain what pickups are.
Pickups are anytime you make a mistake. So you say a word differently than it was printed in text, your editor will send you a timestamp and let you know. Hopefully, it's something small, like you added a "the" in there and it wasn't in there. That's one of my most common pickups that I get. And then you re-record the line and you try and match it as perfectly as you can with the feelings you had in that moment. And then the editor will go in and splice it, and nobody will ever know that that mistake was ever there, and everyone's happy and goes on their way. Hiccups are a very natural part of the narrating process. They happen to everyone. And sometimes, especially in a fantasy book, I'll get more because fantasy books aren't really written in the way that we speak. So it doesn't come out as like naturally. When I record a rom-com, I have like my pickups are like next to nothing because it's written the way I talk. So it's totally fine.
I love that.
But like the fantasy ones, like, yeah, I do tend to get more because it's just the language is just different. And it's beautiful, but it's different.
So you have a good editor. So talk to me about that. Talk to me about the team because people sometimes assume like, oh, it's a narrator. She has a booth at home and she has a microphone and then she's going to send me these files. And some people are not familiar with things like mastering and mixing and engineering. So talk to me about
Yes.
the whole per finished hour concept, which is a finished audiobook.
Yes. Yeah. There is a lot more to audiobooks than just recording. And a lot of narrators, especially when they're first starting out, will do their own editing and mastering. There's nothing wrong with that. But once you start recording more, you have less time to do that. So we outsource and we need a proofer and then an editor master. And they take our sound and then they get it sounding extra beautiful. They make it pass all the specs for ACX or Findaway or wherever you want to upload your files so that it sounds consistent throughout the whole book, clear, beautiful. And I got a question from a new narrator literally today saying, I can't get my levels to match ACX specs. Like, what do I do? And I was like, hire an engineer to teach you or to do it for you because, yeah, you have to get your RMS levels a certain way and you have to know where to place your mic and you have to know all these things. There is a lot to it, and there's a learning curve when you first start out where it's not obvious how to do it. It's hard to teach yourself these things. So I always recommend like some classes, or best case scenarios, you hire an engineer for an hour. They work with you, teach you everything they know, and then you're at least on your way. But if you can outsource, I do recommend that because they are good and they're fast and they always catch things you wouldn't, and it's a lot less to worry about.
Yeah, so we're talking about quality, right? We're talking about
That's
like
right.
it's not someone in a closet and then you're delivering these voice note files to your author. It is the same quality production
Yeah.
than, Audible or any other, or Spotify or any other audiobook production company would put their file through, basically.
Yes, that is absolutely right. And I say this a lot for indie authors, like their audiobook quality should be just as good as if they had gotten it done through a big production company. It doesn't matter if you're hiring somebody off ACX or if you're going through Podium or if you're going through Penguin Random House. Like your audiobook should sound beautiful, and there's no reason that it shouldn't, because if you hire a professional, you'll get quality. And I advocate for that a lot because I see that quite a lot where they're like, oh, it's just an indie author. And I'm like, oh, no,
No.
nobody's book. Nobody's book deserves that. Like every audiobook should sound perfect.
I love that you offer, your talent and your service specifically to help the indie author community. I was in the audiobook industry when the whole self-publishing situation exploded, and so Audible wanted a piece of that, and they launched ACX, which for those of you listening, it's the Audiobook Creation Exchange, and it was the first way to self-publish an audiobook. It was meant to complement KDP and CreateSpace, so you could do your ebook, your paperback, and your audiobook. And fun fact, originally it was not ACX was not built for that purpose, but it ended up being something that independent authors and publishers were like, oh, I could find a narrator. It's like a match.com for narrators and authors to find each other. And there was a lot of education to do in 2011, 2012, 2000. I would tour, I would go to panels, I would teach people, what is a per finished hour? What should I expect the cost to be? Because prior to that, it was extremely cost prohibitive to make an audiobook. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why we had so many abridged books, right? Because it was cheaper to make those shorter audiobooks. So I want to talk a little bit about, let's educate our audience on cost expectations using, I don't know, a standard 6-7 hour novel, for example, one voice.
Yeah. So for a 6 or 7 hour novel, I mean, I always just say most narrators charge somewhere around $250 per finished hour. That's fairly standard. There will be people who will charge less, and there will be people who charge more. The thing about audiobooks is there's so many variables, but just for the sake of averages, 250 is about the average. It's the SAG-AFTRA says this is our minimum, so that's the minimum. So you would times that by however long your book is, and that gives you a rough estimate of what it's going to be. And then to find out how long your book is, you take your word count, you divide it by 9,300, and that'll give you your around how long your book's going to be. Because that's how many words most people speak in an hour, apparently.
That's the formula. Yes, the formula.
That's the formula.
Gosh, I had to tattoo that on my head at some point because I would, yeah, exactly, get on stage and be like 9,300. So so you take your word count, you divide it by 9,300. That's about how many hours your book would be for a narrator to do. And if a narrator's quoting you per finished hour, that includes mixing, mastering. That's the whole delivered
shebang.
audio.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to upload it to 3CX, you're going to ask your narrator to deliver to those specifications.
Yep.
So let's talk about this topic that I absolutely, again, given your background and given my background, the AI of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. Virtual voices. Not my favorite.
It's a very heartbreaking thing for me because I fall in love with the narrator before I fall in love with the book. I pick my books based on the narrator, and I can tell when it's not a real voice.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know how much better it's going to get, but I can definitely tell. And it's not just, we can talk about two things. We can talk about the quality, but also we can talk about what that does to the craft and the community of narrators to have this option of having a robot. I mean, listen to me, people. Having a robot narrate your book.
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's a problem. And I have so many feelings about it because it doesn't just affect, as you say, the narrator. It's, this is a whole community. We've got proofers, we've got editors, we've got producers and casting directors. And, there's so many people that this affects. It's not just like the narrators, and as you say, I don't think it's just about us losing our jobs or money, but it's also the culture of it. Like when you disconnect humans in art, I fundamentally feel like that is a problem for our society because these are places where we connect and where we can feel. I mean, imagine like, when you listen to like a really angsty song and you're like, yes, I needed this right now because like I feel this too. And like the musician's expressing themselves, but I'm expressing myself. And I feel like That's vital. That's vital. And the same is true for audiobooks. Like, I mean, I have bawled my eyes out to audiobooks. I have laughed. I have like felt that feminine rage along with, like you feel it. And if that was no longer an option, I mean, it hurts me to even think about it, because I just think that that whole human connection and expression is so important. And if we keep replacing everything with AI, like, where does that leave us? Where does that
Right.
leave us?
I mean, think about going to a movie theater to watch a robot on screen, right? It's
Yeah,
not the theater and performance and audiobooks and movies, anything that's a performance, anything that is a craft, it is deeply human,
yes.
deeply
All,
human.
all art is, and it's irreplaceable. And I think one of the things they're finding with virtual voices, and I mean, I don't know. I know they keep saying it's going to get better. They're going to start breathing. They're going to start doing all these things, but they're not holding people's focus. Like, that's the main thing I keep hearing is like, oh, I just tune out because the cadence and the rhythm and everything, it's not real. And I keep just hoping, like, the reviews are so bad. They're so bad. And I'm like, well, if the reviews are bad, then people aren't going to buy them. They're not going to make money. And since it's all about money, if they're not making money, maybe they'll ditch it, right? So I keep hoping that the market doesn't go for it. If the money's not there, maybe they won't carry on because people aren't connecting with it and they're not liking it. So maybe there's a
Yeah.
little bit of hope there. I don't know. I've heard from, audiobook publishers, like in the big five, say like, well, we're going to start using AI. It'll be like, she's like, it'll be like white bread. And the narrators will be like, your, your artisan bread. I'm like, okay.
I mean, listen, I'm now seeing scenarios where extremely popular narrators who are very busy are saying, I will sell my voice, pay me, and go ahead and do it. Like, there's so many layers to this, right? There's a bottom of the bottom barrel layer, which is just using a synthetic voice to do something. There's another bottom of the barrel layer, which is without someone's permission, cloning their voice to do it. Those are like, to
Mm-hmm.
me, the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
The next step up is, okay, someone is choosing to sell their voice.
I
They're
can't
getting
with that.
compensated,
I can't with
but
that.
it's still, I have not listened to a narrator who has sold their voice, and then I haven't had the opportunity to listen to the original narration versus what their cloned voice would sound like. But if someone told me, like, I listened to Julia Whelan and Ray Porter and all these people, Victor Vavine, who's a dear friend of mine, Eduardo Ballerini, who's a dear friend, like,
So good.
how would that sound to me? Because the sound could be the same, but to your point, it's
It's the
the emotional,
performance.
it's the
Yeah.
performance
They are
that
actors.
there's a
Yeah.
new there's a nuance. And the other thing that I want to mention, and then I want to hear your take on all this, is there is a big difference between using Speechify to read me an email or a work document or whatever and enjoying an audiobook, right?
100%.
Like,
100%.
I just really want like people to understand that distinction.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one is like a craft and people's careers and a performance, and the other is like an accessibility necessity. And a friend of mine who's blind has been a huge advocate of human voices only. He's like, I have to listen to these AI voices with everything I do. I do not want it in my audiobooks. Like, please don't put it in my audiobooks. That's a safe space for me. Like, and we deserve better. We don't deserve that all the time. So, yeah, but there is a huge distinction between AI voices and accessibility tools versus audiobooks.
Right.
100%.
And
Yeah.
also there's a big difference between, oh, someone sold me Morgan Freeman voice so that my GPS can tell me to take a left turn versus, you know what I mean? Like
Yes. Yeah.
there's a place for these synthetic voices. Like, yes, let me change, what is it, Siri's voice or whomever. Like, sure, let me customize the voices that so that I can be like, turn the lights off or tell me where to turn in the car. But again, we're taught when you start crossing the line into performance, would someone pay thousands of dollars for an opera ticket for a robot to sing? I hope not.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so.
So, but I'm glad you mentioned it. So human voices only. Talk to me about how that whole movement started and at what point did you start to see this AI stuff is really, getting in here?
Human voices only was it was I didn't ever expect it to get, like, as big as it did. I was grateful, but I was recording a book. It was late at night, and I read this line, and I don't remember what it was now, but I just was like, "Oh, this was such a beautiful line." I felt kinda like I nailed it. I had one of those moments where I was like, "Yes." I felt really good about it. And then I started thinking, because this was maybe like a week after they announced they were doing virtual voices, and they were giving them to authors for free. So suddenly we went from like, no, we're never doing virtual voices, to tens of thousands of virtually voiced books just hit the market. And so we were all sort of panicked. And so it was just in the back of my mind. And I read this beautiful line and I thought, wouldn't it be kind of cool if I reached out to my author friends and I was like, that line that you guys, because you all have a line that you've written that you're proud of, like, it was really good. And, send them to me and send them to my narrator friends, and we'll perform them in the way that only humans can, and I posted this video and then I went back to recording. I didn't think anything of it. I went to bed because I'm in the UK, so I'm like ahead of everyone. And I woke up in the morning and it was just like, it exploded. It was like hundreds of people reached out to me, and it was amazing. And then it was like, yeah, it just blew up overnight, literally. And it was great because I think what it did was it gave everybody a chance to feel like they could do something, like they could have their voice heard, like, pun intended, I guess. But like, everybody just felt like, yeah, I can do this. Like, I'm mad and I have no control over it, but I can do this. I can showcase why human voices matter. And a bunch of authors got their book out there that, and maybe they wanted to have a narrator read a line, but they didn't know how to reach out. And this gave them the opportunity. And so many friendships bloomed from that first one. Like, some of my best friends now, who are like my accountability group, I met through that. And I ended up getting work from it. I know tons of other people. So many people reached out to me saying, I got my start with Human Voices Only. And I was like, it was just like this video I posted. Like, I don't even take credit for it. Like, it was everybody else. Like, it was just this thing that everybody jumped on because we all needed it. We all needed to feel like we had a little bit of control, And it was great. And we did it. We've done it 3 times so far. And each time it's just a massive success, and more people do it. And more, like, we had some like bigger named narrators partake last time, which I thought was really cool.
Cool.
So hopefully we can just keep it going. I don't know if it makes a difference, but even if it doesn't stop AI voices, which I hope we can impact it, it's still making a difference in that it's connecting people who maybe wouldn't have connected otherwise. So no matter what, I am so proud of the movement, and I think it's so great that so many people care. It just gives us all a little bit of hope, which we all could use.
I mean, it's a whole hashtag now. It's a movement.
It's a thing.
Listen, as I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking, okay, to what end are we going to end up having AI readers reading AI content? Someone the other day told me something. I think it was my teenager who said they were creating TikToks or videos or whatever, but the people, quote unquote, people who are watching the videos are bots. So I'm like, okay, so now this is the level of ridiculous we're going to reach. We're going to reach books being written or voiced by AI, being consumed by AI. And so AI can learn more. So training AI models on AI written work, like, it is going to be such a cluster.
Yeah.
I don't understand. To what end, I ask you, Samantha? To what end?
I have no answer.
It's just going to be like, it's going to be like libraries for AI, for robots, like written for and by AI. That they can have that. But for us humans, I would very much like my human, authors and narrators.
I can't imagine reading a book written by AI. Like, I have zero interest in reading an AI book because it's not the same. It's just not the same. Like, no, I don't even like they AI'd Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones to make him look young, and I didn't like that. Like,
it's the uncanny valley. Yes, it's the uncanny valley.
I don't like it. I want AI to like clean my house and like do the things I don't want to do so that I can do what I do want to do, which is this dream job of mine. And, you talk about narrators who sell their voice to use, like, to me, I don't know a single narrator who's in this for the money because the money's not great. Like, the only people, like, we're in it because we love performing and we love books. And, like, when we get behind our mic and we get in the zone, there's no other feeling like it. Like, it's such a rush to get lost in a book that you're performing and then know people listen to it and love it and that, like, an author's dream is coming true. And, like, the whole thing feels so good. And there's no way you're just going to be like, nobody that I know would want to just be like, yeah, just send me a paycheck and have AI clone my voice. Like, take the fun part of my job away from me. Like, there's a lot involved in this job that's not the recording. If you want to like
Maybe
take over
outsource,
my
right?
accounting and stuff, that's fine.
Take over those things. You're right.
Yeah.
I want AI to do my laundry so that I have more time to do the creative part of
Yes.
my soul and of my calling.
Yes.
So we're doing it backwards. Some of us are doing this backwards,
Yes.
and we need, as human beings, we need to think, how do we use technology, like you said, to do the things that are robbing us of our energy? Like
Mm-hmm.
doing dishes robs me of my energy. Folding laundry. My husband's always like, when is the robot coming that's going to fold the laundry? I'm like, I know.
I just
Soon,
want Rosie
hopefully.
from the Jetsons. That's all I want.
Rosie from the Jetsons would be great. I agree completely. And again, I'm just someone who's worked in the audiobook industry for so long, who's loved audiobooks for so long, who has had to pull over. I'll say I've had to pull over and cry at some of the narration I've experienced. So
I love that.
it's I have books that I've listened to multiple times because I must experience oh my
Yeah.
God, when Jeremy Irons narrated a couple of things. I think it was The Alchemist. It just having a voice and that's so intimate, right? You're having someone's voice in your ear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Speaking of intimate, I'm dying to ask you. Okay, so I know some narrators, like authors, use pseudonyms. And I know so many narrators who have a pseudonym for narrating the spicier things in life.
Mm-hmm.
So you have one, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I do. And I do not keep it private. I'm pretty open with my pseudonym. The only reason I have one is because I want it to be searchable on Audible so that if you listen to Samantha Norbury titles, like, you're not going to get any spice. I might have like a couple where it's like very, very mild, but it's like off page, it's like off page stuff.
Fade to dark.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly. Like, nothing. My dad can listen to books narrated by Samantha Norbury, okay? But he is not allowed to listen to anything narrated by Dahlia Summers. Like, no, dad cannot listen to those ones. My kids could never listen to those ones. Like, those are off limits. And if you're a fan of the romance, then you can rest assured anything done by Dahlia Summers will not disappoint in that area. See, I don't keep them secret. I thought about it, but honestly, the idea of like having two websites and two social media personalities and like, I don't have time for all that. I
Listen,
really
one
don't.
one time a good friend of mine was nominated, I think it was for an Audie, and it was for the pseudonym one. And he kept those things very, very separate. And so I think it won, and I was like, "Is he gonna get up?" And like on the stage, it was like an anonymous shadow of a person, and like the name of and I'm like, "Oh, this is so funny," because
Oh.
I knew, and the reason I knew, I found out by accident. He did not disclose this to me. I found out by accident. I was listening to a paranormal spicy series, and I love the narrator. It was some unknown narrator, right? Because I couldn't find Googled him. I couldn't find him anywhere, but his voice was great. And the eighth book came out, and I saw my friend narrated it. And I flipped out because I'm like, how can they change the narrator? This is ridiculous. Like, no offense to my friend, but this is outrageous. And you and I are going to talk a little bit about what happens when we change narrators in a series.
Okay.
It turns out someone screwed up the metadata. He was all along the narrator.
Oh no.
Of the
Oh,
book. It's
no.
only changed it quickly because I found it. But I was like, son of a gun, you are so-and-so. You have been narrating these spicy things to me this whole time. No wonder I like the narrator, because like, it sounded familiar and I couldn't quite pinpoint it.
I love that.
So it kind of shocked me a little bit. And then like the next time I saw him in person, I was like, I don't know if I can look at you in the face. This is a little too hot for me. But I love that you offer both because speaking of the importance of performances and things like that, I'm a huge romance fan, and romance fans are voracious. I mean, they will
Oh,
consume
yeah.
the books and the audiobooks faster than you could narrate them and write them and put them out.
Yes.
And to me, that needs to be performed very well.
Yep.
I mean, you don't want a bad performance in any type of genre, but to me,
Well, no one
nothing
wants
is a mood killer.
cringe. Yeah, yeah,
Cringy mood
yeah.
killing narration on a romance book. And there's so many things, right? Like there's single narration romance where the narrator, whether male or female, does a fantastic job of embodying the different genders. And then there's dual, right?
Mhm.
Dual narration, which sometimes people love. And yeah, so I love that you have a pseudonym. How did you land on that name?
Oh my gosh, okay. So I'm a total nerd, like, just throwing that out there if you couldn't tell. So Dahlia comes from the Black Dahlia, which is, like, that creepy, because I was doing a lot of, like, dark romancy type stuff when I first started. And then Summers comes from Buffy Summers, because 'cause I'm,
Oh
like, a
my God, I love
huge
you for
Buffy
that
fan.
so much.
So that, and because I didn't want anything too, like, too, like, James Bondy, like, poor name. I didn't want anything like that because I just don't think that's respectful to the author. But I don't know. I didn't know what to do. I thought about it for weeks, and I was like, "Well, what are my favorite things?" And not like that the Black Dahlia is, like, one of my favorite things, but I did play a video game where that was, like, a murder case we had to solve. It's L.A. Noire.
Oh, I know. Yes,
Yes,
yes.
okay, so I love that game. I played it for, like, way too long, so I was like, "Let's go." I don't know. So that's how I landed on Dahlia Summers. And
Dahlia
then now
Summer.
it's just stuck because I think she's more popular than I am. So,
Created
like,
a monster.
I have, like, a whole, not a big street team, but I have a street team that will listen to my audiobooks and then review them for me. And when I interview them beforehand, I'm like, "What genres do you like?" And they're like, "Give me anything from Dahlia." I was like,
We want more Dahlia.
"Okay." Okay.
I
There you
love
go.
that. And I love that you have, you're open about it and you have both on your website and, people can listen to both
Yeah, I have
genres.
no I mean, everyone has their own reasons for pseudonyms, and they're all totally valid. I just don't have a reason to keep mine secretive, I just wanted it to be searchable on Audible. That's really the only reason I have one at all. Yeah, that's it.
That's great. No, I approve. I approve. So, is there a frame of mind or like, is there a process for switching between distinct voices or even between Samantha and Dahlia? Like, how do you prepare to be in the whatever frame of mind you need to be in to narrate certain books?
That's a really good question. So for Samantha and Dahlia are totally the same. I don't do anything really differently because each book is its own project, right? It's got its own voices, it's got its own tone, it's got its own thing. So I change book to book. Like there are some books where I sound like really young and everything is really light and I'm just super young and happy and that's just super great. And then there are other books where I'm like a more mature person and things are a bit slower and a bit darker and that'll be how I approach it. So they're just whatever the book calls for is what I'll do. As for, I know it's horrible because I've got a cold right now. So, but when there's all these different voices, like because I do such intensive prep work, like every character, I have a really good sense of who they are and who they are. Like when I'm reading a book, I can hear them in my head, and then who they are leads what they're going to sound like. So I don't have like a set of voices that I use and apply, to characters. I get to know the characters and then their voices just kind of come out, which is nice. And especially because I do a lot of fantasy, sometimes I can go really into it and we can do like fun accents and like really do a lot, which is great. I love that. Like the books I'm doing right now, I've got like 75 different characters, and
Oh
they
my
all have their
gosh.
own, but it's okay because I've got Irish accents, Scottish accents, English accents, American accents. So like it can help me, bridge that, like make them all unique. But sometimes even when there's no differences that are that big, just their personalities are different. So someone's going to talk slower, someone's going to talk faster, someone's going to, have more rasp, someone, like they're all unique. So they all get a unique voice.
I love that. And I do you ever narrate more than one book at a time? Like,
I
how do you
h-
get
I have, but I do not like to do that. Because I get really lost in the book I'm doing. So one time I had to switch and I did not like it. I really like to focus on one universe at a time and be fully devoted to that before I move on to another one. The most I do, I mean, I prep other books while I'm recording a book, but I don't like recording more than one at a time if I can avoid it.
And so how long, again, this is another teaching moment, how long, because if a book is 7 hours, that doesn't mean it takes you 7 hours. So
No,
how
no.
long is a turnaround if I'm an author who hires you, we all align, I give you the manuscript, it's good to go, and it's a 7-hour book? What's sort of the timeline to
Okay, so
delivery?
this again will be really different depending on the narrator and what their setup is, if it's their only job, like, because a lot of people only record at night or whatever. And it also depends on the genre. Like I was saying, like a fantasy book will take me sometimes 2.5 hours to one finished hour just to record it. It can take a really long time because I fumble a lot and go back. And especially when there's made up languages and things like that, it can just take me longer. If it's something like a cozy mystery or a rom-com, it's maybe 1.5 hours to an hour, which is pretty quick. And that's not the same. It really does vary for everybody. And then you have to throw in the editing time on top of that. So this is just for the recording. But 2 to 1 is a pretty average ratio. So 2 hours of recording to one finished hour of audio is fairly average. But again, so like a 7-hour book I could record in a week.
Right.
But a 7-hour book for somebody who maybe has a day job, it could take them easily 3 weeks or a month. It's like it's so different
It
for
just depends on, yeah, but a
yeah.
full-time narrator could turn it around in a week.
Yes, in a week, yeah, and then probably, like, another week for editing, depending on the editor. I work with 2 different editors, and I work for one of them does all my dual and duet stuff, and his process takes a couple of weeks, which is fair because especially if it's a duet, because there's a lot more to do. And then my editor who does all my single stuff, he edits as I record. So, like, by the time I'm done, within, like, a couple of days, he's got my pickup packet ready for me. So
Oh,
it's really quick. And so, like, I
that's
love
nice.
that. Yeah.
Oh, when you do duets, so do you do them separately, or are you recording
Totally separately.
simultaneously?
Yes,
Separately.
separately and, like,
Isn't
different
that
consonants.
okay? So I always wonder, like, actors who have to do green screens, like that. To me, that's the equivalent of like you having a crazy conversation with yourself.
Totally by yourself. Yeah, we have, a dog clicker, and anytime it's their line, I just click that so that the engineer can see the spike in the recording so they know where to splice it in. And then I just keep going. And it's a skill talking to yourself, like,
I would
and
feel so.
responding to, like, you're responding to, and I do it live all the time too. And it's like, I know this is going to sound weird, but just bear with me.
I love that. I love that. When I've seen obviously multicast productions and things like that, and I've seen both when everyone's in the room, and I've seen when everyone's in separate places, and or just again not simultaneous. Like people are just reacting to things on the page, and
Yeah,
they somehow come together really, which again is a testament to performance, right?
definitely. I like to practice too with my partner if we can. Like, I like to get together and run lines together just so I know how they're going to approach things. Because, everyone's different. Some people are a lot more subtle. Some people are like, whoo, over the top. Like, everyone's got their own way. So I like to know how they're going to approach it so that I know how to react, especially if it's a romance and, like, if it's a love scene. Like, if they're going full steam and I'm sort of reserved, like, or if I'm going full steam and they're kind of reserved,
You
like,
have to
that's
match
not going to
energy.
sound right. Yeah, we
No, you
have
have.
to match energy for sure.
We recorded it duet once separately, and I believe it was the male narrator kept they each were pronouncing the same word differently,
No, I hate that.
and we had to pick one to re-record
Oh,
because and also the accent was wrong. Yeah, it
oh no.
the regional accent was wrong on, I forget whose track it was, but yeah, this is why you need to do the right prep work.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
like you said, I like how if you do run your lines with your partner, because you all want to be on the same page and not record a whole book and then figure out that it was the wrong accent or the wrong name
No.
pronunciation.
And anytime I do a duel or a duet, I always do an MP3 of all the pronunciations for everything. That way we are aligned. And if we're both wrong, but we're wrong together.
Wrong together. Make the t-shirt. I love that. What is the one thing you wish authors knew about making an audiobook?
Mm, well, I guess first of all that it's possible. Like if you want your book to be an audiobook, there are options that do not include a virtual voice. There are options. So it's nice to know. It's nice to know that there's royalty share plus per finish hour options. There's exclusive, there's non-exclusive, you distributing wide or just through Audible, iTunes, and Amazon. I think it's important to know those things and what they mean and what the limitations and benefits are. And also, I always think it's a good idea to vet who you hire beforehand. New narrators are not a avoid. It's not like avoid new narrators. A lot of them, we were all new at one point, so it's not an automatic no. But anybody, I stress this a lot because anyone can audition on ACX. They can do it in their bathroom on an iPhone, and that doesn't mean you're going to be able to have a deliverable product in the end. And what I hate is when I hear like narrators ghosted authors or, because this happens a lot because they realize it's a lot harder than they think. Like they think narrating an audiobook is easy, they'll be able to do it, and then they realize like, I can't.
Never mind.
Never
JK.
mind, this is way too much work because it is, and it will always take a lot longer than they think, and it's a whole thing. So I always just vet the people you hire first, just by asking them questions, and if you're convinced that's the voice you want, just pad deadlines, give them an extra long time to do it if it's their first book, because inevitably they're going to run into things they didn't know, And
Yeah.
there's no problem with that, but just give them a little bit of grace to work it out.
I think
Figure
that's
that
really good.
out.
I think that's really good
Yeah.
advice. I also wanted to ask you, I know you said you have a cold, but you sound fantastic.
Oh
But
my
obviously
no.
narrators get sick, PSA. What
Mhm,
do you,
mhm.
but in the same vein of sickness, but not quite sickness, what do you do to care for your voice, which is such a valuable asset?
Ooh, I take a lot of vitamins. I take a lot of vitamins daily because I have 2 small children, so illness, bugs are in my house a lot, and I cannot get sick ever because my schedule is so full. I'm like, I can't. But I do, like, before I start recording, I do warm-ups. I do like 10, 15 minutes of warm-ups, which I'm really lucky. One of my accountability partners is a singing teacher, and she taught us like these really great vocal stamina warm-ups, which is great because I'll sit in here and record for 6 hours at a time sometimes, and you've got to be able to keep that up. And I hydrate. Like I drink so much water. And I have like a tumbler like this big full of tea that I'm like always like
Always chugging.
herbal tea. Yeah, just and it's warm and it just keeps everything lubricated and nice. So yeah, I hydrate and I do a lot of vocal warm-ups and I take a lot of vitamins, which haven't helped me right now.
No, but
But
I wish you a speedy recovery, but you sound amazing. And I'm going to link a bunch of stuff in the show
thank
notes so
you.
people hear your samples. You've made some really insightful videos on YouTube for people who want to learn more about this process and not be so scary. But one of the words that you just said, the word stamina, I just really want authors to understand because this is one of, if not my biggest audiobook pet peeve. You can't just narrate your book. I have had so many conversations of having to talk authors out of this. There are very small instances where I think it's a good idea and we hire a voice coach for them and it's a memoir, et cetera, et cetera. When an author says to me that I'm going to narrate my own book and they do it in that way of like, how hard could it be type of energy? And I'm like, you
Mhm.
have to have the physical stamina to do it. Can you
Mhm.
back me up here, Samantha?
Yes. Yes, I can, because I get asked that a lot too. And, there are always going to be cases where, yes, that is the right choice. Julia Whalen wrote a book and she narrated it. That's the right choice. Like, that is absolutely the right choice. And a lot of authors that I know have like a theater background and like, I get it. But it is not, it's narrating audiobooks is not reading a book out loud. There's so, because I've heard people be like, yeah, but it'll be cheaper to do it myself. I'm like, will it though? Will it? Because you need the equipment, which like might sound obvious. Like, you need a microphone, but did you know you also need sound treated environment? Like, did you also know you need a DAW? Do you also know that you need to learn all the tech? And like, by the time when I first started, my like per finished hour to work ratio was like 12-1. Like, it took
Oof.
me 12 hours to record and edit for one finished hour. It took me so long because I was such a perfectionist, because once you hear a mouth click, you cannot unhear a mouth click. And once you see it in your wavelength, like, you have to pull it out. You have to you can't leave it in there. So I would obsess over making it so perfect. This is why I outsource, by the way, because I cannot. It would take me so long. And then, yeah. And this is what I see with authors, because I follow some people on TikTok who are like, I'm going to narrate my book. And I'm back here like, okay, well, are you sure though? And I saw a really good video once with a producer who was saying, I think this was for Scholastic. And he was saying, like, he gets authors all the time who are saying they want to narrate their own book. And what they do is they have like 4 narrators read something from their book anyway. And then they send it to that author. And then that author's like, oh my God, I didn't know it could sound like that. Yes. Okay. Yes. Let's hire that. Like, we can bring a certain something that like you might not. Plus, then you've got like a whole other person cheering you on and promoting your book, and a whole other way for people to find you.
Fans of that narrator will now buy your
Yes,
book based on. I
that's
think
right.
it's absolutely correct. We've had authors who are like, no, I'm going to narrate it, and we booked the appropriate studio time, and then we had to extend the studio time because they couldn't even do 2 hours in the booth in one day. So it is
It's a
an
lot.
art. It is a physical feat. It's not just you reading to your kids at night or
No.
or even like podcasting. It's a completely
Hearing
different
yourself breathe through a microphone for the first time is so freaky too. I had an author just record just like the thank you note at the end, because she did a Kickstarter. And she's like, I really want to record it so it's personal. And I was like, well, if you're sure, like, if that's something you really want to do, like, get under your covers of your bed, like, that's fine. And so she did that, and she's like, oh no, I need to buy a new microphone. So she went out and bought a microphone. It's like 10 seconds long. She did this, and then she sent it to me. She's like, my breath sounds really weird. There's all these weird noises. I don't know. I was like, it's fine.
It's
It's
fine. We'll take
totally
them out. We'll
fine.
take them
Yeah,
out.
we can deal with it. It's fine. Like, everyone who hears themselves recorded from a professional microphone for the first time, like, it is weird. It is
It's
so
trippy.
weird. Yeah.
It's trippy. Just to
Yeah.
even do this podcast when I got a microphone and like some simple earphones, I'm like, ooh, why am I hearing myself so clearly? This is really weird.
It picks up everything.
Everything. I was editing an episode the other day and I could hear like somebody walking up and down my stairs. I'm like, why is this microphone picking up everything?
I
Yeah,
know.
it's a technical endeavor. It's an art. It's a craft. And I will never stop saying it. A robot. I don't want a robot in my ear for my books under any circumstances. So
Yay.
I don't. I want to close with a question, but it's a double question because I feel they're related. I was going to ask you what excited you most about the future of the audiobook industry, but I also want to blend that with my usual question that I love to ask people, which is, what do you want to be true 12 months from now?
Ooh, okay. Well, I think audiobooks seems like sales just keep on rising, which is great, because it's not even just good for the audiobook industry, but I feel like it's just good for the world, because more people have access to stories now than ever before. And it's creating it's excitement about books. And that can only be a really, really good thing. So I love that about audiobooks. I like the trend of like live streaming and getting to watch people narrate audiobooks. I think that's really cool. Although I realize the whole TikTok ban might throw a wrench in the works.
But I will say, I love your videos on Instagram when you're doing the
Thank you.
live narration. So I am a fan. Thank you.
Thank you. So and I like multicast too. I think those can be really exciting. Like, I like what graphic audio does. That kind of brings, and the trend seems to be going that way. And I also really like the trend of narrating more naturally, so that we're hearing books more and more narrated as if they are the characters in the book, and less like your professor's reading it to you or the librarian's reading it to you. Like, they're narrators are now kind of talking faster. They're laughing when they should be laughing. Like they're putting more human feelings into it, and which I really like. I like that trend. So that all really excites me for audiobooks. I think audiobooks is doing a great thing for the publishing world in general. And I like that so many indie books are getting audiobooks too. I just think that's phenomenal, and they're getting more recognition, and I think that is all just beautiful. What I would like to see in the next 12 months, I would love for virtual and digital voices to just disappear, be like, that was failed, next. Like, never again will we
Let's
go down
manifest
that
that.
road. Let's manifest that. Yeah, so I think that's probably it.
I love this. I've loved this conversation. I now want to go load up some of your audiobooks onto my app so that I can listen to you even more. And I'm really excited. I'm going to link a bunch of resources, and your website. Like I said, you're just so generous on your Instagram with information on people to be able to find you if they want to work with you. And we're in the same circles. I hope one day we can meet in person.
That would be great. I know I know you asked if I was going to APAC, and I am. So hopefully I'll see you there. And did you say you're going to the London Book Fair? The London Book Fair?
I am going to be this year I booked my flight for the London Book Fair, so I will be there as well.
That is amazing. I really want to go to that. That'd be so fun.
But that's great. We will see each other in New York City then the week of APAC. So that's great.
Yeah.
See, look at me meeting my guests in person. This is going to be great. Samantha, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope you feel better.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much for joining me this week. For more information on today's episode, please check out the show notes. Before you go, make sure you subscribe to the podcast to receive new episodes right when they're released. You can subscribe right now in the app you're using to listen. And you can also follow me on Instagram @reignitewithnicole. Lastly, I do have a quick favor to ask before we go. If you're enjoying the podcast, I hope you'll let me know by leaving a review. Thank you again for joining me in this episode of Writer Unblocked. I'll see you next time.